recording started.
This lecture will be about accessing primary sources, which you are not absolutely required to do for this paper, but which most historians consider to be the principal kind of work that they do. Let's look first at what primary sources are. We've already talked about this, but let's have a little bit of a refresher. Primary sources, remember, are historical traces from the era under study. They are artifacts or photographs or published types of accounts, usually an account from a participant in events or participants that are close to events. Sometimes the published accounts are first-hand accounts that were never meant for public consumption but have been published later, such as a diary or personal papers. The most important, however, are records and manuscripts, and those are the kinds of things that we want to look at now, and we want to look at in this presentation, this lecture. Records and manuscripts are traditionally considered by most historians to be the best types of primary sources. Occasionally they're published, but often they're available only in archival repositories because they are unique. That is, they are one of a kind, quite literally one of a kind. So how do you find archival materials? Well, the place you have to start is with an archival repository. So how do you find archival repositories? Well, you can start with the Google. You can look up primary resources, primary materials, things like that. You might be able to find online reproductions of archival materials. You might be able to find online archives through a Google search. You might be able to find archival repositories in your neck of the woods that have material that you can access by doing a Google search. But other mechanisms for finding archival repositories, including looking at the Troy Library databases, one of which is WorldCat, and another of which is ArchiveGrid. ArchiveGrid is it's a proprietary database that took most of the National Union Catalog of Manuscript Collections and started charging for it. There's about 1 million plus finding aids from 2,500 repositories available through ArchiveGrid, and it uses simple keyword searching to help you locate these finding aids. This is not a full text database. That is, it doesn't link you to the archival material. It links you to finding aids that are kind of the indices of archival collections, and our next lecture will be talking about how to read an archival finding aid. Another free resource that provides basically the same information, though because you contribute to archives contribute to ArchiveGrid and they contribute to this other database, NUCMUC, the National Union Catalog of Manuscript Collections, then these two kinds of collections are, like most archives, limited to what their contributors give to them. Let's look at the other one, NUCMUC. This is a free union catalog. It's a free database controlled by the Library of Congress and available at loc.gov/COLL/NUCMUC. It's a cataloging and finding aid retrieval program from the Library of Congress. And if you just type in to a Google search NUCMUC, N-U-C-M-C, you'll find this. Excuse me. Finally, going at it a slightly different way, you can go to the University of Idaho Library Special Collections Department and find repositories of primary sources. The repositories of primary sources are also linked to the NUCBUC homepage. And we have linked the repositories of primary sources to our Blackboard site for this week's lecture. So these are some ways of getting at archival materials either directly or at getting at archival materials by getting at archival repositories. Archival research is not something you can sit at your desk and do, nor is library research, and everything's not on the web yet. So you may have to go someplace to find these materials. With any luck, it'll be someplace close to where you are now. Using an archives is different from using a library. Researchers generally have to go to an archives physically themselves, or they often have to hire someone to do their archival research for them. I have paid people to do research in archives that I cannot get to in a timely manner. The going rate is about $50 an hour. But generally speaking, archival researchers, I'm sorry, 50 bucks an hour, 30 bucks an hour maybe if you're lucky, 20 if you're doing some research in a little tiny archives, you know, and using those people, those researchers in the local area. They just want to get paid. And that's pretty cool. But if you don't want to pay to go there yourself, then you may end up having to pay somebody to help you out. Archives are different from libraries. Most students have been exposed to libraries and to the internet, but they've not been exposed to archives. You've probably been exposed to libraries since maybe you were in first grade, and the teacher took you to a library. Well, did the teacher take you to an archives? I suspect not. How do libraries work versus how do archives work? Well, in the library, the books are arranged on the shelf by subject. So if I, for example, edit a book on World War I in Alabama and on the Alabama home front, which, lo and behold, I've done, then that is in a particular place in the library with other books that are similar. If I author a monograph about the Good Roads movement in Alabama, that's going to be in a slightly different place in the library, arranged by subject, which is why the Library of Congress subject headings are so important. Libraries tend to be self-serve as well. That is, they cut you loose in the stacks and let you find your own resources. You can also gain access by using their OPAC, even from afar, and looking up the catalog records, which are often in the MARC format. Archives are different. Archival material, archivists arrange archival material by a principle called the principle of provenance. That is, they arrange by the creator rather than the subject. So my two books in the archives might be in two different places under two different subjects. But if I donate my research material to the archives, then my notes to both of my books will be arranged in a collection under my name that lives in the same place in the archives. But that doesn't really mean much to you because there is no self-service in the archives. You don't get to go in and browse the shelves and yank stuff off of the shelves. No, the service is all highly mediated because the collections are unique and hard to replace. So what is it that you are looking for? You aren't looking for the material. You don't rummage through archival records and manuscripts. You get access through finding aids, though catalog records might point to the finding aid. So our next lecture will talk about how you use a finding aid. But this lecture was about how a refresher in what primary sources were, a closer look at records and manuscripts as the most important primary sources, a little discussion on how you might find archival materials and archival repositories through a Google search, through WorldCat, through ArchiveGrid, through NuckMuck, and through the repositories of primary sources. And then, as you see here, we looked at how libraries and archives differ from each other, at least just a little bit. Okay, thank you as usual for your attention.